And welcome to the webinar and our Energy Saving Trust webinar series, It's Time to Decarbonize. Today we'll be discussing how to decarbonize your transport fleet. My name is Nora and I work for Energy Saving Trust alongside my colleague James, who you'll be meeting shortly. A bit of housekeeping before we start. The webinar will be recorded. We have a British Sign Language interpreter with us today, Nicole, who will be here with us for the duration of the webinar. We encourage you to ask questions throughout the webinar by using the questions box, and we'll be answering these at the end of the webinar in the Q&A section. If you'd like to have a chat with our team and ask questions specifically about your organization, please fill out the form, which you can find in the chat, and we can set up a conversation. At the end of the speaker presentation, there will be one short poll question that will appear on your screen, and your responses will remain completely anonymous. To give you a bit of background, Energy Saving Trust is an independent organization dedicated to promoting energy efficiency, low carbon transport, and sustainable energy use. We aim to address the climate emergency and deliver the wider benefits of clean energy as we transition to net zero. We empower householders to make better choices, deliver transformative programs for governments, and support businesses with strategy, research, and assurance, enabling everyone to play their part in building a sustainable future. So I'll now hand over to James to get us started.
Hi, I'm James Brown, obviously not the famous one, as you've probably realised by now. I have helped fleets decarbonise for the last 5 years while working with Energy Saving Trust. Prior to that, I spent 14 years as a fleet manager with a mixed fleet, vans, trucks, buses and cars, and spent my prior career to that in the automotive and transport industry. So today I'm going to talk to you about how to decarbonise your fleet. And the brief for today's sessions are the fundamentals for fleet decarbonisation. We will cover why decarbonisation matters now, using data to your advantage, looking beyond the vehicles, working collaboratively, developing the plan, and also consider grey fleet and salary sacrifice and where that may fit. So why fleet decarbonisation matters now? Well, 2030 is not far away. In fact, it's slightly nearer than it was a couple of months ago on my calendar. And lots of people and lots of organisations do, of course, have their zero emissions target for 2030. Greenhouse gas emissions are obviously a big issue. Fleet and transport are often the biggest source, or at least one of the biggest sources in an organisation. If you are a local authority and you run refuse trucks, you may find that each refuse truck can emit 1 tonne of greenhouse gas emissions a week, or even a 3.5 tonne van travelling 25,000 miles a year will emit 15 tonnes of greenhouse gases each year. So if you have 10 or 20 of either or both of these, it really does add up, and the impact on the environment does become considerable. The second reason is efficiency and the availability of viable alternatives that are more efficient now. So lots of vehicle use cases can now be served by battery electric vehicles, more with some thought than you may initially think when you look at your fleet. In many cases, whole life costs of battery electric vehicles can be comparable to diesel, and if you use them wisely, they can be cheaper as well in many cases. And yes, of course, the clock is ticking. We talked about the net zero target, often at 2030. We've got a clear government policy environment with no new petrol or diesel vehicles to be sold from 2035 in many vehicle classes. So you've got a choice, even taking aside the fact that cumulative emissions are best dealt with now rather than wait until later. How do you affect a fleet transition? Is it better to drip feed the transition now, or do you force yourself into a late migration by delaying? Of course, if you leave it late, then you're going to have bigger hurdles and bigger risks. But if you can start now, then those hurdles and transitions may be more manageable. So data, where does data come into this? It's important to ensure success and an optimized transition to zero emission in a decarbonised fleet. So vehicle operational data will really help. Start point is consider the quality of the data that you've got. Audit your data collection and the quality. Look and see what is there, what gaps there may be. If your data's not robust, if there's bits missing, if it's confused, then put in a plan to improve it. So looking at the scope of your data, what is collected? If it's incomplete, again, put actions in place to improve it. So really what you would want to be looking for to see what could be decarbonised through electrification, for example, would be vehicle utilisation data. This will include miles per year and particularly miles per day. It's good to know what the average daily mileage is and important to know what your peak mileage is on different vehicles and in different segments of the fleet and so on. If you can quantify fuel per day through Canvas telematics, that's a great way of doing it. Then that's brilliant because you can understand the energy consumption and what that would likely become in an electrified fleet or with other energy sources. It may not be that you have to have telematics to do that. If you are a local authority fleet and you refuel the vehicles every day, particularly refuse fleets, then you can get to that same data by a different way of looking at daily refueling. It's also important to understand what days a week vehicles are being used for, how many hours per day, and things like load capacity of vehicles, what's needed, how much your vehicles might need to tow, so that you're buying the right spec vehicles and understanding if there is a alternative available to diesel at the moment that you might be using at the moment. It's also important to understand the performance of your diesel vehicles for the sake of improving that for now, and also what the impact of that may be on alternative fuels. So effective data collection and analysis doesn't just enable a like-for-like transition from diesel to battery electric. It also enables you to understand where vehicles may be possible to downsize and therefore become more efficient. It also enables the removal of vehicles from fleets where they may be surplus to requirements. So current projects I've got at the moment, large number of minibuses. When you actually start to look at the data, there are vehicles that are in the same location. The department that own them insists they're all needed. But when you put 3 vehicles together in one location, there's only 3 days where all 3 are used at the same time, and only 20 something days where 2 are used at the same time. So these vehicles can be rationalised to a much smaller fleet, possibly through sharing the vehicles, better planning, maybe through pooling the vehicles to a central part of the fleet, or multi-shifting vehicles and doing things slightly differently. Things like general travel and mileage claims need to be understood through data, and this allows your scope 3 emissions to be measured and potentially managed, although the scope could change if you use company cars or a car allowance. It will vary. Data clarity also allows future electric energy consumption to be predicted. So understanding the daily peaks of energy demand will help you to understand which vehicles won't ever need any in-shift charging. It will also help you to understand which ones will need in-shift charging, how much may be needed, where and when that might be needed from the telematics, and the variance between the need and the perception. The amount of times I've been told none of these vehicles can be electric, we always travel a really long distance, and then you get into the data and see that's not the case. It's quite a common theme that people think they need the vehicles for more long trips than they do. Also, understanding energy demands helps you to understand what battery size you may need maybe you just want to charge the vehicles overnight. So maybe you could quantify what type of battery you'll need if that doesn't exist on the market yet. Or maybe it will help you to see that you only need the smaller battery model, which is cheaper and has less embedded carbon in it. It'll also help you to understand those vehicles where it might not be worth going electric because the energy and emission savings are not sufficient to justify the extra emissions embedded in that vehicle. The best thing probably to do in that case is to get rid of that vehicle or go to the pooling option, but this will certainly help you to understand if that's the case. But looking beyond the vehicles, you might need the egg before the chicken or the chicken before the egg. I'm not sure which way around that one is, but looking at your vehicle operational data can help you to plan fleet infrastructure requirements. So understanding how many vehicles stay in the depots overnight, or maybe how many should stay. Sometimes vehicles are put in different places they shouldn't be overnight. Understanding how many vehicles need to go home at night, and understanding maybe how many vehicles stay on street overnight in your fleet. This all allows you to understand where a fully electrified or a maximum electric fleet would look like at the end of things. And it's always important to start with the end in mind with these things. This is a really key point. Form your strategy with an end in mind and not just an ad hoc reactive approach. Okay, let's get 3 more electric vehicles, let's get 3 more charge points. It's really important to actually think, what's this going to look like at the end, and start with that in mind. And also think about what are the implications of other policies that you may have. You know, should you really be looking at letting customers charge in your car park if you're going to need the grid capacity for your fleet eventually? So thinking about how that all impacts is important. So electrical supply and demand is a really good basis to start the depot charging planning process. So by understanding the energy use of your vehicles, the peak daily energy use, you can understand what that energy capacity of your depots may look like for a fully electric or a maximised electric fleet. The question then to ask is the connection big enough? Is there enough spare capacity to add in the chargers that you need? Using the data that tells you how long the vehicles are available for overnight can help you quantify the size of your charge points, and don't fall into the mistake of just saying, oh, I need these rapid ones because that sounds like a good idea. You might not need any rapid charge points if your vehicle, which means you might then have a lower demand on your grid capacity if you're able to have the vehicles off the road overnight and fully charging on a 7 kilowatt AC charge point. So looking at this, if there isn't enough static energy, that may be represented on that graph in the dark green band, can that be easily made bigger by the local substation capacity? If that isn't possible, then if it falls short, how much does this fall short of what you will need for a fully electric fleet? And then if you get into that area, we can look at how much, and you need to look at how much dynamic capacity can contribute and help. So for example, in the example that you can see on this page, there's light green shading, and that's energy that isn't ever used, but it's actually of energy that's only available at night. So the light blue is the peak energy use at any given half-hour time in a day. So a timer on this case could free up an extra 15-20 kVA of energy. But also that light green energy is all fair game to put into a battery if you want it to then be available later at night as well, any of the daytime energy that might be spare. And modelling half-hourly data will bring a different shaped graph for every depot, but quite often with peaks of energy use in the day and troughs overnight. This will help you to understand where depot power generation might help your fleet, but you also need to understand what might be going on elsewhere in your organisation or at the depot in terms of electrifying heating, etc. And it also helps you to understand what other options there may be beyond that in terms of increasing grid capacity. So working collaboratively, This is really important to work with all sorts of people across the organisation, every level. Let's start with the drivers. Good communication and keeping the drivers on board can make the transition easier. It's really important to identify good drivers who can help spread the positivity for this transition. More energy efficient drivers of diesel vehicles will use less energy in electric vehicles. And we know that battery electric vehicles can be more sensitive to poor driving styles. So dealing with driving style before the transition and during and throughout is really important. I've heard stories of vehicles that may last, electric vehicles where brake discs and pads may last 80,000 miles, but also ones where they may last 20,000 miles, which just shows you the level of sensitivity to poor driving. But going beyond that, who needs to be in the transition team to make this transition happen? Obviously, the fleet management will be key to that, but if there are vehicle operating departments that fleet provide a service for, then each of these needs to be engaged. Estates are important, estates departments, if you have such a thing, and any energy management facility within your organisation. People in procurement and finance are obviously key to that. And where you're starting to talk about home-based charges, grey fleet, salary sacrifice, HR become quite important too. Oh, I think I went one slide too fast there. So yeah, you're not alone. Fleet advice and consultancy exists at the Energy Saving Trust. There are thousands of fleets in the UK who will have to be on a similar journey to yourself. Energy Saving Trust has provided independent fleet support to over 200 public sector fleets in the last 5 years and over 100 private sector fleets. So we are familiar with fleets of all shapes and sizes and all kinds of issues that go with them. Advice and assistance is available and adaptable to your needs, so please feel free to get in touch after this if you want to talk about it further. But there will be other opportunities. There'll be peers, there'll be people in similar organisations who've already gone further along the curve than you, or you may be the one who needs to help others. But I encourage people to share resources, projects and learning. Lean on experts where you know they exist. Fleet decarbonisation is a huge multidisciplinary undertaking, and a fleet manager really will struggle to know it all, especially in a big complex organisation. You'll also find that lease companies, vehicle manufacturers, infrastructure providers, telematics companies have all been developing broader support packages to help take up their products. You can get some really good help from those sources, but do be aware of sales bias when you do talk to those people. So, developing the plan. Failure to prepare, maybe you prepare to fail. So from an early stage, make a plan and make a start. Bear in mind, if you're transitioning to electric, the transition is capital intensive, so structural changes in how you fund things may have to happen. You may save money on the running costs later on, but this needs to be quantified and planned accordingly. And yeah, make sure you understand any whole life cost advantages of the transition. Investment and a sustained attention is required to meet the goals. So it could be more challenging, like I said earlier, to deliver this in a efficient and service resilient management manner if it's left too late. Grid connection expansion, which I talked about previously, will only get more competitive. So getting in early and getting that in order is really, really important. You don't want that to become an obstacle that it may not be at the moment. Also, understand options and revenue opportunities that may enhance your plan. Is there any way you can sell access to your charge points? Is there any vehicle to grid opportunities that might exist within your planning? Of course, engage with others if you need help. It may be that you need a full fleet review or fleet plan put together by somebody else, or it may be you just need empowering to ask the right questions and have the right literacy over energy, charge points, and asking the right questions from the start can really help you save time, money and stranded assets. What I mean by that is if you make the wrong call at the start, buying the wrong stuff, you may have to have it ripped out later, or it may prevent your grid connection from being able to do all you need to do. So it's really important to ask for help and get that basic literacy at the start of the plan. Moving away from directly operated fleets, there's grey fleet and salary sacrifice, all do contribute to fleet emissions and planning. Yes, grey fleet might be scope 3, but it can be very high emissions. So these are private vehicles used on behalf of a business. Where there's been no interventions or management of a grey fleet, you will find that many or most will drive by default for business. Few will share lifts. Some will maximise journeys, especially in cars that are past the worst of their depreciation. Where I worked for 14 years, there were some people who travelled a long way who bought their cars for £400 or £500 on the basis of the fact that the 45 per mile paid them back a lot of profit in the end. There will be old and high emitting vehicles on those fleets. There will be faulty and illegal vehicles as well by probability, and some will be underinsured. So there are risks for an organisation with a unmanaged grey fleet. Some will drive to work only because they need a car for work. So the car park could be full with cars that don't need to be there. Grey fleet emission reduction can be affected quite well in organisations. The key is perhaps starting by changing the order of approval for journeys. So if that journey is by default a car at the moment, if you actually have to ask permission to go in your car, or you have to initially first try teleconferencing or Teams, walking or cycling or going on public transport, then that will really change the outlook of travel. Obviously after that, pool cars usually come next in there. Talked about pooling vehicles to save departmental vehicle numbers, but it can also save private car usage. There are some great pool vehicle management schemes out there. Companies like HireCar operate systems where you can have the keys sorted, the vehicle checks sorted, and even have the vehicles provided and the booking system provided, or you can use your own vehicles with those. I think there are various suppliers that do offer that service. When alternatives are in place, when you do offer a pool fleet, then of course you can start to apply standards to your pool cars that say, like, we don't want any vehicles that are over this emission on our fleet, on our grey fleet. We don't want any vehicles over this age because we've given you an alternative. Home-based roles can affect these schemes, and maybe this can be an area where salary sacrifice could help, because if people are having a newer, lower emission car, if their job needs a car, then that at least does reduce emissions. It's an alternative for company cars, and it can be used as an employment perk as well. So the cost of new cars, as we know, has increased drastically. The salary sacrifice is a good way of bringing that back into reach for people. It's a bit of an antidote to fiscal drag, where tax boundaries don't change and salaries gradually go up by the cost of living. It works much better with zero emission vehicles, although the cars do become part of the fleet emissions, so the scope 3 changes to scope 1. The provider should cover the maintenance, tyres and insurance, and even provide charge points in the monthly cost in some cases. Early termination insurance is something that the employee will pay as part of the deal, but there's no tax on this. It's basically the employee accepts a lower salary, and the employer can save on the NI as well. This does help to reduce emissions from old employees' cars, and it does have some duty of care benefits in terms of the unmanaged older vehicles with potential issues. It will also help potentially with retaining staff if it's seen as a good enough perk. However, there are some downsides. It won't be for everyone or every organisation. Not every individual will want to pay for a new car, even with the tax rebates that go with it. I've said about the scopes changing. It may also commit people to car use. So if you're getting people in salary sacrifice cars, they may then think, well, I paid for this car, I may as well use it to commute and all my business travel. So it has to be done with care in terms of comparison to travel hierarchies. There may be duty of care issues as well if you get people buying very fast electric cars on there too. Charging could be contentious for people without a drive or their own off-street parking, or so be careful you don't overcommit if you've only got a small grid connection at your depot or office and you've got a lot of electrification needed of your own assets. You don't want to scupper that by having to provide energy for people in salary sacrifice cars. Also, talked about early termination insurance. You don't want to be left, that needs to be part of the scheme because you don't want to be left with unwanted vehicles from leavers. And of course, there's the admin that goes with it too. So just to close, obviously I've not been able to touch in tremendous detail on any of these subjects due to time, but fleet decarbonisation matters now. Data is really important to the transition and developing the plan. Always look beyond the vehicles, work collaboratively, and also consider what you can do to remove grey fleet emissions. So I want to say thank you. If anybody does want to get in touch, here are the details. We offer comprehensive help and assistance with fleet decarbonisation of all types. So I'm going to hand back to Nora now.
Perfect. Thank you, James. So before moving on to the Q&A section, we wanted to let you know about our next webinar and launch a poll question. So here's a notice to let you know about our webinar on the 27th of February at 11:30 a.m., how to decarbonize your housing portfolio, planning for EPCC and the net zero carbon transition. In this webinar, we'll discuss the best practice on decarbonizing your housing stock, how data and modeling can support your net zero journey, and more. We hope to see you there, and there'll be shortly a link in the chat where you can register to this webinar. So we'll now move on to launch our poll question, and we'll give you a bit of time to answer that. So you should be seeing that on your screen shortly.
Oh, I'm trying to...
It should launch here, so.
Oh, hang on.
Perfect. Perfect. I think it'll launch. Okay, so that should be launched on your screen now. Just a quick poll. We'll just give you a minute to respond. And again, your responses will be kept anonymous. Perfect. So thank you all for your participation in that poll question. We will now move on to the Q&A section. And we've already had a few questions submitted prior to the webinar. So we'll first address these. And again, if you'd like to have a more in-depth conversation or get some questions specific to your organization answered, you can fill out the form in the chat and we'll set up a conversation. So we can now start with the first question, if that sounds good to you, James. Perfect.
Okay.
So the first question we've had is, what is the provision of EV charging infrastructure, particularly in public bodies with limited funding?
Okay, so there is a workplace charging grant which gives £350 for each charge point that's installed. That's something that the government provide. I've also heard today that if you happen to be a school or college or university, I don't know if we've got any schools, colleges or universities on there, there is a new grant scheme that's been launched for public charging points, publicly accessible as in for your guests or visitors on your sites, which gives up to £2,500 per point. I don't know what the limit on that is, it's quite a new scheme that's just been announced. So that's the support. In terms of bigger depot and bigger changes, that is something that generally does need investment from an organisation itself. Now, quite often that isn't like a fuel tank wouldn't be considered as part of the vehicle cost, but it is something that does need investing in the transition, and that will vary from depot to depot and place to place according to the nature of the grid connection and the total demand that you will have. Sometimes strategies need to be adjusted according to what is available and what is possible in a location. It isn't always possible to put every vehicle electrified in every location, so there is definitely complexity in there.
Perfect, thank you. So we've got a second question here. What government grants are available and for how long?
Okay, so talked a little bit about the EVCI, the electric vehicle charging infrastructure grants there. In terms of the vehicles, there is a plug-in van grant that can be different amounts according to the size of your van. I believe if it's a large van, it can be up to £8,000 towards the cost of an electric van. If you're going larger, if you're going into a small truck territory, then that grant is £16,000. If you have a large truck, say a 26 ton or 44 ton, then that grant is as high as £25,000, although I am aware there are only 100 of those available each year, as is the current outline from government, and I think about 85 of them have been taken for this financial year. So if you do run out of £25,000 grants, that then becomes 16,000 by default. So there is a limit to how much support's available as well, although there are amounts that are specified. There's a government website that if you Google plug-in van grant and go to the gov.uk, all of this is broken down in detail.
Great, thank you. So the next question we have is a bit of a two-parter. So what are the best long-term investments in adopting net zero emissions and low carbon refrigerated vehicles? And can you speak about funding for third sector organizations?
Okay, so taking the second part of that, there is no specific funding that I could pick out for electrifying vehicles from the government side of it. We do have various schemes that are less fleet related. There's obviously the Levi Fund for local authorities in terms of doing on-street charging, but in terms of fleet, it is the same grant regime that exists for all fleets and customers. In terms of refrigeration, so I've done some fleet reviews that have looked at refrigerated fleets. Obviously, there's a whole range of refrigerated vehicles, from the little vans like the Renault Kangoo size vans up to 44-ton trucks with trailers, and we call them donkey engines that are quite high emitting on those trailers. There are a growing number of options available in each segment. The key thing is a battery electric powered fridge will be more efficient than a diesel powered fridge in terms of energy efficiency. They can be operated through the drive battery or through an EPTO. There's different ways of powering those, but the key is that does move away from the emitting diesel. Where I would suggest the transition is best modelled is understanding how much energy that vehicle uses at the moment, from both a drive point of view and a refrigeration point of view, and making sure that these tallies with the battery capacity and the charging opportunities that you have. So yes, it's very possible, it's very clean, it's a big improvement, but it will depend to some extent on your operational patterns as to how best to deliver it. Now, we can help with that, of course.
Great. We have a few more pre-submitted questions. So the next one is regarding LWB vans. Is there likely to be a viable alternative to diesel?
Yes, so long wheelbase vans. So at the moment, these have progressed massively over the last few years, and even more so in the last months or weeks even. So we have at the moment the market leader electric-wise is the Ford Transit e-Transit, which comes with a 68 kilowatt-hour battery. That's quite good for a lot of urban operations, a lot of trade type vans. Realistically, you may need a high-powered recharge ability if you're going to do longer mileages on that, and know that there is sufficient infrastructure on regular routes to deliver that. However, we've found this week that Renault have introduced a new version of the Master, which comes with 87 kilowatt-hour battery. That's giving you significant range. I think Renault are claiming 280, but that's WLTP, so get a bit of cold weather and a bit of a load on, you may be getting closer to 200, but that's a big improvement. You can tow up to 2.5 tons, I think, with that one, and you can also have a really strong payload. Beyond that, we know that the Mercedes Sprinter will be there in this slightly enlarged long wheelbase van category, should be able to use the derogation that allows people to drive it on a normal car license. That's going to come with a 110 kilowatt battery. We know that the Iveco E Daily is also available with a 110 kilowatt battery, although that does take you sometimes into the realms of 7-ton vans. So yeah, the solutions are there. The charging is getting quicker, the battery capacities are getting better. I guess there comes a point where a lot of your fleet can transition, and maybe there'll be a few vehicles that are left over that solutions need to be found for, and that's where having the broader telematics, the broader understanding of what happens across the fleet, and the better ways of collaborating with departments and maybe pooling the long distance vehicles, that's where that can really help as well.
Great. So our next question is a bit of a specific question. It's regarding tires. So our EVs average 14K per set versus 35K miles on ICE. Is there a hidden impact?
Right, okay, so talked a bit earlier about brake discs and pads and driving style and the sensitivity of the vehicles to that. I think there is an element where a heavier vehicle, an EV, will wear tyres slightly more, but I think the issue will be also exacerbated on drive wheels by the increased torque of the electric vehicles. They generally have a little bit more of an ability to pull away slightly more sharply than a diesel vehicle. Now, if some of that will naturally lead to a bit more tyre wear, but some of that is a process that can be managed. So I think even in a diesel fleet, some of the vehicles might get 35,000 miles out of the tyres, but you may get the driver with the heavy right foot who gets 20,000 miles, and you may get the super careful driver who gets 45,000 miles. So I think there'll be an element of hidden impact, yeah, that's to be considered, but there'll also be an element of driver interaction that could help with that too. Where those two lines interact will depend on various factors, and it will depend from fleet to fleet. But yes, that is definitely something that would probably want to be factored into your whole life cost analysis in terms of maintenance costs. Although, of course, the savings on the other side of maintenance will be you don't have oil to change, you don't have anywhere near as many moving parts that could go wrong. So it does tend to balance out, but if you consider it in isolation, yes, you could take that view.
Perfect. So we've got another question here.
Yes.
Regarding lifelong EVC footprint, is it best to wait until an ICE vehicle is ready to be replaced and then buy a secondhand EV?
This is a really interesting question. I like this question. So I alluded to some low usage vehicles, and a lot of early take-up of electric vehicles in fleets were the van that hardly goes anywhere. Now, I have to question that approach in the sense that that's not going to reduce emissions by very much. And actually, if you've got a decent sized battery on that vehicle, it might never pay it back in that organisation's lifetime ownership of that vehicle. If you're only doing 2,000 miles a year, I think it'd be something like 10 or 12 years before you pay back the extra embedded carbon in the battery. So high utilisation of electric vehicles, maximised utilisation is really important. In terms of fleet changeovers, generally our advice would be run the vehicles as you would run them, the diesel vehicles, unless you've got loads of capital and you want to make the transition sooner while you've got the chance. But if you've got a general steady flow of money and a fleet replacement program, I would say do that as it's scheduled, because but obviously plan with the end in mind. But if you're getting rid of a diesel vehicle that's 2 years old, getting rid of it early, somebody else is going to take that and use that vehicle for the rest of its life. So there is that aspect of it. In terms of used electric vehicles, this is just emerging as a new opportunity, really, because for a long time there weren't many of them. Particularly cars, there weren't very many, and the prices were right up there with the new prices. But as the first tranche of leased electric vehicles are coming back, and more are coming back, we found used electric car prices have dropped substantially. And actually, it's quite possible to get a low mileage, low use electric used vehicle now for a fraction of the new cost. So actually, given the fact that a lot of the battery warranties last for 8 years, if that electric vehicle is doable for the job you've got for it, if you don't need the latest charging speeds and the latest battery tech, and actually a 40 kilowatt hour Nissan Leaf will do for that particular role, then there is a cost saving opportunity there. Obviously, all the same caveats and risks of buying used do potentially exist, and you need to do your homework on battery residual life and condition. But there are more and more people who will repair older batteries as well. So the opportunities, the evidence is mounting that there is potentially a good long life for a battery vehicle, which supports that case, really.
Great. So we've got a couple questions coming through live, and I'm conscious of time as well. But I will ask these from some of our attendees. So the first one is, how does a transport manager logistically cope with all electric fleet, for example, 130 plus, if there is a power cut overnight in a service critical industry? So for example, the NHS.
Yeah, this is a question that lots of people ask. So recently, looking at a fleet review for a local authority, and they were very keen to show me their backup power, and that pretty good piece of kit. Now, obviously, if you were to use your backup generator, backup power, and charge some of the vehicles, some of the more critical vehicles from that, you'll be using diesel on those particular days where that kind of resilience is important. Then obviously the emissions wouldn't necessarily be reduced. Now, it doesn't happen that often. It is a potential issue. It is something that wants to be planned for. Maybe contingencies that look at alternative places to charge, although if it's an area-wide power cut, I think there'll be more than just yourselves with the problem. But yeah, there's definitely something to plan for in terms of backup, auxiliary, or other options, and maybe prioritize those, because not every vehicle is going to be so critical that it has to be out all the time. There'll be ambulances that are a lot more important than a van that carries the internal mail, for example. So it's a case of planning and prioritizing it as part of that process. So yeah, understandable concern, but obviously we had diesel shortages and we had those kind of issues as well.
Yeah, really interesting. So it looks like we have come to the end of our time today. And I'm conscious we still have a couple of questions to answer. But if we didn't get a chance to answer your questions, or if you have any further questions that came up during the webinar, please fill out the form in the chat and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you so much for your time today and for tuning in. Have a fantastic rest of the day.
Hi.